One of the most difficult things churches are facing today are how to respond to ethnic tensions when there are fault lines that run along very real cultural differences with very painful history feeding into it. And I think that actually this is something that even the early church was dealing with, and we can draw some lessons from Acts chapter 6. So Acts chapter 6 is most known for the story about deacons, but if we look at the story itself, we'll see that there are some implications even for us today in the way we think about how to love others across natural differences. So in the story in Acts, the church in Jerusalem is suddenly at risk of fracturing along some of these very natural fault lines, cultural, ethnic fault lines, because you have two groups in this first church. You have Greek-speaking Jews, Greek cultural Jews, and Hebrew-speaking Jews. So the reason I use the word culture is that whereas the Hebrew Jews were native to Palestine, the Hebrew-speaking Jews, the Greek-speaking Jews were immigrants of a sort. They had come to Jerusalem to celebrate Pentecost, and likely in Acts 2 had heard Peter's famous sermon there and had been converted and had decided to stay around. After all, there was not a church for them to return to back in their Grecian culture. And so what you have in this first church in Jerusalem are, Palestinian natives and kind of Johnny-come-latelys, people who have adopted Judaism but are not ethnically Hebrew, ethnically Jewish. And so what you see in Acts 6 is a division that is running along those very fault lines, because the widows, the Grecian widows, are being overlooked in the daily food distribution in favor of the Hebraic or the Hebrew-speaking people. And so it's really interesting that what the apostles do is they tell the congregation to choose from among yourselves 7 to enact a solution for this problem. And the 7 that are chosen in Acts 6, verse 5, are all Greek names. This is the hidden punchline of the whole story. You can imagine that the headline in the newspaper the next day: majority Hebrew congregation appoints 7 minority members to lead in solving this massive crisis. And this shows that even the majority culture believers in the Church of Jerusalem were willing not just to, this wasn't an exercise in tokenism. They weren't just saying, okay, we'll give these minorities a perfunctory role. No, they were actually entrusting their own Hebrew-speaking widows as well to the 7. The 7 were charged to solve the problem for the entire church. And so this is a wonderful picture of those in the majority culture seeing and hearing and empowering in appropriate ways, not to meet some arbitrary quota. This was not ancient political correctness, but this was about Christian love, welcoming one another, as Paul says in Romans chapter 15, to another church with Jewish and Gentile Christians trying to figure out how to get along. And so we can learn a lot from Acts chapter 6, even by way of this kind of secondary application for some of our modern tensions which beset us today.